Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome into another episode of Wiltfong Whiparound. I'm Grace Remington with our Director of Recruiting, Steve Wiltfong. We're going to start in Ann Arbor, where there's a lot of excitement. The Wolverines landing 2 commitments this week from running back Jordan Marshall and offensive tackle Ben Roebuck. Their class, Steve, now ranks 3rd in the 2024 cycle, and they're trending towards several other blue chippers. So what have you been hearing out of that program?
Yeah, 2 powerhouse programs in the state of Ohio. Michigan was able to go into and land blue chippers. Jordan Marshall is obviously a massive recruiting win, Grace, for them to beat Ohio State in a head-to-head for him. And we kind of talked about it on the recruiting show and on recent whip-arounds that Michigan's coming into these recruiting battles against Ohio State fully loaded now. They beat the Buckeyes twice in a row. They've been to 2 straight college football playoffs. Those Joe Moore awards, those 800-pound trophies in the building look good on the offensive side of the ball. And it's one of the most feared rushing attacks in college football right now. But Jordan Marshall visited last weekend, and he had some future visits scheduled, including Ohio State this weekend, but saw all he needed to see. In addition to nearly 2,000 yards rushing, can also catch the ball out of the backfield. He's also darn near a 4.0 student. So Michigan has everything he's looking for on and off the field, built a good relationship with Mike Hart and company. And then Ben Roebuck with the relationship he had with Sharon Moore, how many times he's been to Michigan. Again, those 2 Joe Moore awards, Michigan's going to have a chance to win the Joe Moore Award again this year before they're going to lose maybe 5 guys from their offensive line after the season. So this is a pivotal year for Ohio or for Michigan to recruit the offensive line position. They have 2 guys that they covet in the fold with Luke Hamilton and Ben Roebuck, and they're in the thick of it for several more at the point of attack moving forward. Andrew Sprague, top 247 offensive lineman. He's been to Michigan a few times already. I think Michigan's the team to beat for him. He's going to be back for the spring game on April 1st. He's at Nebraska this weekend, been some other places, but really like where Michigan stands for him. Max Anderson's another offensive tackle that I think Michigan's in the lead for. And then Kyle Frazier, we talked about him recently, a composite 4-star offensive lineman from Austin, Texas, a Michigan legacy recruit. I also have Michigan forecasted for him on the crystal ball. So there's 3 more guys right there that Michigan, in my opinion, is in the lead for. Then you get it to Jake Guaranera, who returned this spring and had a great visit. Michael Luini's high on Michigan. So when you play at the level on the offensive line that Michigan's been playing at, you're going to attract your top targets. So this is going to be a big offensive line class for Michigan, and it's going to be very talented. And those are some of the guys that I think they're well positioned for. Obviously, we love where they stand with 5-star quarterback Jaden Davis, who was back up on campus for a 5th time recently. I think he's closing in on a decision. And obviously, we love where Michigan stands there. And then his teammate, receiver Channing Goodwin, is another player that I think Michigan's in really good shape for as well. And then the last big crystal ball that I have out there is Aaron Childs. He's a top 247 linebacker from Good Counsel. I think he's one of the best second-level defenders in the country. And if Michigan's able to pair him with Mason Curtis, who's already in the fold, that would give Michigan 2 very athletic, versatile players in the linebacker corps that can rush the passer, they can play in space, they can get into passing lanes and be disruptive in a variety of ways. So Michigan, as you said, number 3 recruiting class in the country, coming off 2 college football playoffs. They're winning blue chip battles on the trail, and it looks like many more to come.
All right, in case anybody missed it, 24/7 Sports recently updated our list of 5-star recruits. There's all sorts of analysis and breakdowns on that on our website for you to go check out. But Steve, only 5 of the 32 5-stars are committed. So let's go through some of these uncommitted prospects. And we'll start with Sammy Brown, number 5 overall, the top linebacker in the country. His top schools are Clemson, Georgia, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Tennessee. So what's the latest with Sammy Brown?
Yeah, and he's dead set on taking all 5 of his official visits to those programs before making a summer decision. Again, Clemson and Georgia look like the programs that might be an inch or 2 ahead. And if you ask me who I would pick going into these next wave of visits, I maybe would give it to Georgia by a hair. But he was recently back at Clemson for a spring practice last Wednesday. Obviously has a fantastic relationship and rapport with Dabo Swinney, Coach Goodwin and company. He was the first player they offered in this class. He's been camping there for years. But Georgia has talks with Coach Schumann, Coach Smart, and getting on campus. He attended their national title parade again, and he's super excited about his opportunity there. He's going to be at Oklahoma the first week of April. He's going to be back at Tennessee over Easter weekend. Those are programs that should not be slept on either. Brent Venables, obviously getting to know him so many years at Clemson, has the Sooners in really good position. And then he's been to Tennessee several times. And then Ohio State is also going to get an official visit from him. And James Laurinaitis being hired at Ohio State has helped the Buckeyes' chances. Those two have really hit it off. You know, they connected when Coach Laurinaitis was at Notre Dame, and now he's at Ohio State. So that helps the Buckeyes' chances. But official visits, Clemson's getting the first weekend of June, then Georgia, then Ohio State, then Oklahoma. Tennessee is scheduled for potentially April 22nd. But there is a chance that they move these dates around a little bit. So even though that's what's currently kind of slated, there could be some alterations to those official visit plans.
All right, next on the list, we got the 13th overall prospect and number 3 edge in the country, Dylan Stewart. He recently visited Michigan and Alabama. He's got Ohio State next and a full calendar of visits this spring. What's the latest with Dylan Stewart?
Yeah, and Brian Doan reports that he'll be back at Georgia, with Penn State coming on April 7th, South Carolina's the 14th, Colorado April 21st, Oregon April 28th, and Tennessee's going to get a trip in the summer. And when I handicap this recruitment for Dylan Stewart right now, I look at Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina as the programs that I feel are in best position for him right now. And if I had to give an edge to one of those 3 programs right now, I think it's Georgia. He's one of the top overall prospects on Georgia's board, regardless of position. He's already been to Athens. Georgia's doing a heck of a job recruiting him. He's got that return visit coming up here in the near future. And the intel and people I talk to around this recruitment, I think that Georgia's well positioned for him right now. Now, that doesn't mean there's not a lot of runway left in this recruitment, because there is. So certainly not sleeping on the Crimson Tide, certainly not sleeping on the Gamecocks. I think he really loves those 2 programs as well. Then places like Oregon and Miami should not be ruled out in this recruitment, in addition to all the other programs that we talked about that will be getting some visits here in the spring.
All right, moving on to our number 22 overall prospect, Jamonta Waller. He's the 5th best edge in the country, the first 5-star out of his high school in Mississippi. So that's pretty exciting for him. And he has visits all around the SEC this spring. So where do you feel like he's leaning?
And he could play linebacker on the next level. And speaking of that, I think Penn State's the program to beat. I think they kind of view him in that mold, playing the linebacker position for them, but obviously a guy that can bring a pass rush presence from that position. So I think a visit to Penn State in January has still set the bar. And I love where the Nittany Lions are positioned in this recruitment, but can they hold that lead, you know, with all the SEC schools that are coming into the picture? You got Florida surging. I think that they're kind of number 2 in this. And then he's excited about LSU, Alabama, and Georgia right now. And then, like you said, he's got a bunch of visits coming up. He's got Auburn today. Texas A&M is next Monday. So he's making the rounds. But Penn State right now, James Franklin and company have set the tone in this recruitment.
All right, and one more we want to hit on. It's our 26th overall recruit and 8th wide receiver in the cycle, Mylan Graham. He is crystal balled by you, Steve, to Ohio State, but Alabama, Tennessee also in the mix. So what can you tell us about him?
And don't forget the Boilermakers. I think they're the biggest challenger to Ohio State right now. And maybe at some points here in the winter and in the spring, maybe inched ahead of Ohio State. But I think a recent visit back to Columbus, where he got a chance to spend time with Brian Hartline and Ryan Day and the staff, he told me opened his eyes. And I think Ohio State's back in pole position for Mylan Graham. I think a decision could come at any point. Ohio State was first to offer him, Grace, long before he was on our radar. He camped at Ohio State with no offers and earned his first scholarship on the field from Coach Hartline and that staff. So they were first to buy into him. And now he's obviously a national recruit and a 5-star. But I think that is also another thing that kind of resonates with him, that Ohio State was first to recognize his abilities. And then again, Ohio State's pedigree of developing receivers and the relationship he has with Brian Hartline. I think the Buckeyes are in excellent position here, but Purdue has come on strong under Ryan Walters, Corey Patterson, and that new staff.
All right, well, staying in the Big Ten, Nebraska has a huge recruiting weekend coming up as Matt Rule begins the rebuild. Just one commit in their class so far, but the headliner of the list heading into Nebraska this weekend is Dylan Raiola. And Steve, for a lot of these names, Nebraska's competing against the best of the best to land them. So what are you hearing heading into this weekend?
Yeah, several top 247 prospects coming in Nebraska this weekend. It actually begins on Thursday with one of the top tight ends in the country, Jaden Riddell. Then a lot of these blue chippers will start getting into Lincoln on Friday. Dylan Raiola is no stranger to Nebraska. It's one of his top schools alongside Georgia, USC, and Oregon. And I think he's excited to continue to get a feel for Marcus Satterfield and how he's coaching up that offense and that quarterback room, and he'll get an opportunity to get around Coach Rule in that environment. He was in Lincoln in February visiting his uncle, offensive line coach Donovan Raiola, but he wasn't able to spend time with the Nebraska staff then because it was a dead period. So he's got a chance to get back, see what spring football looks like there, get a chance to get around the players and get a sense for how they feel like they're developing. I think the visit to Georgia last weekend put the momentum in back towards Georgia. That's a program that's led for Dylan for a lot of his recruitment at various times, and getting back to Georgia and being in that environment, I think was really exciting for him. 2 visits to USC this calendar year. His relationship with Lincoln Riley has them at the forefront of this recruitment. And so I think this is a visit where Nebraska needs to make a little bit of a move with Dylan Raiola, but he obviously loves the Huskers, loves Matt Rule's track record as a program builder, and then certainly has just always loved the Huskers in general with his dad, Dom Raiola's history there with the school. Some other big-time guys that are making their way over. You got 5-star defensive lineman Williams Nwaneri coming into the visit. I know he enjoyed his visit to Georgia last weekend. Was also recently at LSU. But Oklahoma, Oregon, Missouri, and Tennessee are some other major contenders for him, while he also has intrigue in Alabama and Ohio State. Then Ryan Wingo just got a big boost in the top 247 player rankings. He's up to number 6. Georgia, similar to Raiola, I think Georgia grabbed some momentum with Wingo following his visit to Athens last weekend. This is a one where I think Nebraska would need to make a significant move, but the family's excited to get to Lincoln and see what they have to offer. And he's connected with a lot of these recruits that are going to be on campus. Nebraska's going to take their swing at Brandon Baker, top-ranked offensive tackle from Mater Dei. Gatlin Bear is a speedy receiver that we talked about last Thursday that I think Nebraska's firmly in the top 5 for him. Nate Frazier, Andrew Sprague, Carter Nelson, the number 1 player in the state, top 247 tight end, top 247 offensive tackle. Grant Bricks has had this visit scheduled for a while. Jacob and Gerard Smith, the twins from Cheshire Academy out there in Connecticut, they'll be on campus as well. Thomas Hayberger's a linebacker from South Dakota they're high on. So Nebraska, they have 1 commit right now in 2024. Roger Gradney from Texas. He'll be on campus, but with Matt Rule and company here in Lincoln, these guys are swinging at the best of the best, and a lot of those guys are going to be in town this weekend, and we'll see where Nebraska stands coming out.
All right, let's get to some mailbag questions now. Thank you, everybody, for sending these in. We're going to start with one from Checkers1227. He says, with Michigan in the top 5 in 2024, do you think this is the cycle they finally break through on the trail and have a class that matches their success on the field?
Well, to say that like Michigan needs to break through on the trail is a little inaccurate, because they've broken through and won the Big Ten 2 years in a row and won the college football and been to the college football playoffs. So they've obviously been recruiting at a high level. And when you look at the NFL draft, those results kind of are evident as well. So I think that we appreciate the way you look at the recruiting rankings, but obviously Michigan has overachieved from the recruiting ranking standpoint and has already been recruiting and developing at a super high level. Now, I think when you look at this class, are they going to have a chance to land some guys that we deem more talented than perhaps we deemed some of their guys beforehand? I mean, it's looking that way. And we kind of talked about it at the top of the show. This is going to be one of the best offensive line classes in the country. They're sitting pretty for one of the best quarterbacks in the country. They just went out and landed arguably the best running back in the Midwest. Maybe they add to that. And I think that their linebacker haul has a chance to be as good as anybody's when all said and done as well. So they're continuing. I think the real question is, the real way it should be said, Grace, is that they are maintaining their championship pedigree on the trail with this class, and they're trying to find another 2 wins at the end of the year with the way that they're recruiting right now.
Well, I think we've talked about it before, Steve. It's not all about the class rankings. They might not have a top 10 class, but Jim Harbaugh is all about the development, and that's where the success that we see comes from.
And he's about finding guys that fit their culture. And if you do that, you're going to get top-notch coaching and top-notch strength training at Michigan. And so I think they've just done a good job of finding guys that are wired right, guys like Blake Corum, who are just warriors that come in and want to work. And Jim Harbaugh, like one of the reasons why they like this guy, top 247 edge, Brian Robinson, who Michigan is trending for in the crystal ball. He's just a huge weight room junkie. And Jim Harbaugh loves that kind of stuff right there. That's his kind of guy. And I think ultimately he'll land Brian Robinson.
All right, cool. I'll looking forward to seeing some of those PRs coming out of the weight room. Those videos are always so crazy. Our next question from OREM30. Should we be keeping a closer eye on Wake Forest in the 2024 recruiting efforts with the Deacs having a top 10 class this early in the cycle?
Yeah, they're number 7 right now, Grace, and they're not far removed from winning a Gator Bowl 2 years ago. And so I think out of 6 of the last 7 seasons, they've won at least 8 ball games or something like that. But yeah, this is a terrific class. And in my opinion, it's headlined by quarterback Jeremy Hecklinski from Marietta, Georgia, Walton High School, who had a fantastic junior year, throwing for over 3,520 yards and 37 touchdowns, playing against some of the best competition in the state. They upset Buford in the state playoffs. And this is a guy that, in addition to the traits on film, you talk to people that are familiar with his game and just his mentality, just how he's a competitor, he's a warrior, he's a guy that finds a way to win on Friday nights. And so I think just his mentality in general is what Wake Forest is looking for at that position on the trail. And he's a guy that's going to have a chance to come in and be the heir apparent to Mitch Griffiths, who I know that they're very excited about going into the season. But Wake Forest, they've recruited well in the front 7, linebacker in particular, a position of need for them this cycle. So I know they're excited about going out and getting Whitman Whaley from Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and Darius Jones from Powerhouse St. Francis in the Baltimore area. And when you look at the guys who they have committed, they go to powerhouse programs like St. Francis Academy, Rome in Georgia, where Justin Terrell goes, Walton. And so they want guys with winning mindsets. And Camden Hardy, the jewel of the class, his dad was a Buckus Award winner, Kevin Hardy, first-round draft pick. He's been a disruptive player on the prep level there for Atlantic Coast. So I just think Wake Forest, they've kind of emerged as one of the teams in the ACC that's in the hunt to make the ACC title game. Competition's getting a little stiffer over there in that league with Florida State on the rise. Miami's a program that you would think with the way that they're recruiting, they're certainly on the rise. But Wake Forest holding strong, recruiting their kind of guys on the trail. And this class is already ripping and roaring.
Yeah, 9 commits in that class so far, second in the ACC. Good question there. And our final question from Bearcats22. How do you think Scott Satterfield will do in his first cycle at Cincinnati?
Well, it's kind of tough to say right now. Cincinnati's looking for their first commit, but kind of watching him at Louisville over the course of his tenure there. I mean, I know he was engaged in recruiting. He's a guy that's really strong when recruits are in his office he's eloquent in his message and talking about the program. He's got terrific offensive pedigree throughout his career and has had some big wins at places like App State and Louisville. And so I think that's the stuff that'll kind of resonate on the trail. And there's a lot of really good in-state football players in Ohio and in that Kentucky region where they can recruit. So it's certainly out there. And that's a program that we're accustomed seeing atop the group of 5 recruiting rankings when Luke Fickell and company were there. So big shoes to fill at Cincinnati, and still kind of waiting to see as they recruit and then maybe watching the film of the guys they get in the fold, we'll be able to have an indication of how well they're really going to do.
All right. Well, good stuff as always. Thank you, Steve. And thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll be back here on Monday, but you don't have to wait for content until then. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to 247sports.com to be up to date with all the latest recruiting news. Until we see you again, have a great weekend.